Another Apple executive is stepping down later this year. Jeff Williams, who's the guy who basically, if you've watched September keynotes over the past few years, is usually the one presenting the Apple Watch, meaning that Tim Cook is essentially the oldest executive at Apple, and today we're talking about if he's next to step down, who might replace him, and why you should care about Jeff stepping down. No, it's not just a trivial role about operations. He actually has pretty massive shoes to fill. Let's begin. For one, Jeff Williams, also, like Tim Cook, came from IBM. He worked at IBM for 13 years, but hopped over to Apple in 1998, meaning, yes, during the Steve Jobs and iMac era, and has worked his way up the corporate ladder ever since, assuming more and more responsibility as he got older, including basically taking over the design team once Johnny Ive left. Fairly controversial change up, because I think a lot of us can agree there's been some designs that have improved, bringing back legacy ports and even having frontal I/O on the Mac Studio and Mac Mini, but then again also having some controversial heatsink designs and backwards compatibility concerns with iPad, so it's been a mixed bag in regards of design. But now obviously that Jeff Williams is stepping down, apparently to spend more time with family. Can't blame him. He says he's got 5 grandkids, which probably makes work a lot more difficult to prioritize. When you get older, you don't have as much energy as you used to, but Tim Cook is still there, probably because he has precisely 0 grandkids. As far as I know, he's single, but it's never too late, Tim. If you're ever feeling lonely, just remember there's an app for that. But Jeff Williams was also in charge of the whole customer service program at Apple. Not to mention, he oversaw pretty much all of the major health developments that went on with the Apple Watch, so having a big change up in that department could spark some pretty massive changes. Some people, I've already heard rumors that Apple's working on a ChatGPT-like bot for customer service so that they don't have to rely on as many humans in the future, because that's what engineering is all about, right? Taking away jobs. It's the future. We can complain about it, but we can't stop it. But the fairly interesting change up that supports the idea that Tim Cook is not going anywhere despite his growing number in years. He still acts very hip and healthy as far as I can tell, so it doesn't seem like he's slowing down, but a good indication that he's not is that apparently the design team will now be reporting directly to Tim Cook instead of Jeff Williams, as if Tim did not have enough on his desk already. Now he's basically going to be overseeing the job that Johnny Ive used to have. So quite big shoes to fill for Tim, but of course Jeff Williams was in charge of all of the operations at Apple, including the supply chain, customer service, and health developments with the Apple Watch. So Tim Cook is not taking over all of Jeff Williams' duties, but another huge Apple veteran is Mr. Sabi Khan. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it, but he's been at Apple even longer than Jeff Williams. He's been there for about 30 years now, and both Jeff and Tim had very, very positive things to say about him, saying he's kind of like a supply chain mastermind. He's been able to navigate the complexities of a global supply chain for many years, so they feel fairly comfortable in him taking over the COO position. And I think that's good, personally, that their chief executive team are people that have been at the company for decades. They remember pre and post Steve Jobs very well, and I'm sure it was not easy mass producing consumer electronics in different parts of the world, especially during COVID and the chip shortage and everything. So if they were able to handle that, then Mr. Khan is probably a good choice for the job. But this does beg the question, as Jeff Williams is approaching that typical retirement age, and Tim Cook is certainly past the average retirement age as well, is John Ternus still the runner-up for CEO? Because that's what Mark Gurman has reported on in the past. He's probably the youngest executive at the company, but I think the main reason a lot of us want John Ternus is because everything he seems to do with the company is what appears to be going great, you know, just being in charge of hardware, and that's one of the things at Apple that I think a lot of people have been more impressed with lately, and specifically the Mac team and the transition with Apple Silicon. It seems like John Ternus has done a great job and is quite a bit younger than everybody else on the board. So that kind of makes him somewhat of a prime suspect for the next CEO. And also, Tim has said that whoever takes over for him should be someone internally at the company that's been there for a long time. John Turnus absolutely has. Craig Federighi is another runner-up people have mentioned because he's a bit younger and he's been at the company for a long time. But I don't know, I just feel like there's been a lot more skepticism about Apple's execution when it comes to software. And personally, as difficult and as challenging as software may be, all of it can kind of be handled for the most part domestically. Whereas I think a lot of Apple's challenges, at least right now, I still think most of their bread and butter does come from hardware sales. I get that Tim Cook is trying to move them towards more of a software company that brings in recurring revenue through memberships, but that hasn't exactly taken over as their primary income yet. And I think being a bit more well-versed in hardware and supply chains might set you up for more of a chief executive role, but who knows? There's many other great options they could go with in the future. Deidre O'Brien, for example, has been working at Apple for a very, very long time and seemingly is doing kind of a lot of the same roles that Steve Jobs had Tim Cook do right before Tim Cook became the full-time CEO. So even though she's not the COO, I just think it's worth mentioning because for a while now, people have been speculating that maybe when Tim Cook steps down, you know, Tim Cook was COO before Steve Jobs stepped down, and that made people think Jeff Williams was going to be the next CEO. But now, of course, he's not going to be. He's stepping down and going to be basically retiring by the end of the year. So I don't think people should just look at the COO position as they are definitely the person who will become CEO next. Otherwise, in this case, I guess Mr. Khan is next. But Deidre O'Brien does have a lot to do with people and has a lot of customer focus and has been in charge of retail for a while and all of those Apple Store locations, which does involve a lot of managing people and logistics and figuring out the brand and its image, which might end up being more important for Apple in the long run as they kind of struggle with the concept of hardware becoming more and more hard to notice in regards of differences year over year. You know, the iPhone just kind of looking the same year after year, barely any noticeable differences. Similar story with iPads and Macs. So maybe if Apple wants to go in that direction, they might care for more of a brand-focused CEO over a hardware expert like John Turnus. But if it's an age debate, then Turnus still has the win here. O'Brien is still a little bit on the older side, but hey, I'm sure both of them would do a great job. They're very passionate about the company and they've worked there for a long time. So who do you guys think should be next? Should it be Federighi? Should it be O'Brien? Should it be Turnus or someone else you can't even imagine? Sam Altman? If AI is the only thing that matters, right? Just like let OpenAI acquire Apple. That makes a lot of sense. But all those thoughts, let me know what you're thinking down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.